June. A traveler's coach drives through the winding roads of the Lake District. The people on the coach were from the southern parts of England and are a part of a scheme for tourism employed by the South Lakeland District Council. When the coach arrives at Bowness, the people step out. One of them, a late 20-something man called Blake Charing, observes his surroundings and respectfully breathed it in. It was the perfect choice to get out of bustling London and to help him out of a situation that he was keeping close to his chest. He carried his backpack over one shoulder and headed to the bay where the lake cruises were. The sight of Windermere Lake was glorious to his eyes. It gave a natural, tranquil feeling that he could experience in other parts of Europe, and the motor vessels gave the place a historical timepiece. Well, mainly to him. He then headed into the town. It was the start of the summer and the sun was blearing the heat onto his head. He did wear his sunglasses and continued looking around. He then headed to one of the back streets and came into view of a small pub called Hole in the Wall. But it wasn't the actual pub that took his interest, but something by what seemed to be a small old coal or wood building. He walked up to something covered in a tarpaulin and sneakily pulled up. It was a blue police box. He let go of the tarpaulin, being a bit baffled by the sight of it, and then checked his watch. It had gone 3:15. He decided to get himself a drink from the bar and entered. He approached the bar and waited for a couple of minutes to be served. A blonde woman came over handling a few pint glasses and asked what he liked to drink. He was quite stunned by her. Firstly, she looked gorgeous and had a good figure. Secondly, she was American. He stumbled his words and went for a pint of the local brewed ale. He continuously watched her as she handled the pump and poured his drink. He paid for the drink, took a couple of sips and started some small talk with her. He introduced himself and said he comes from London. The blonde woman called Louisa Shepherd says she's from Iowa and mentioned to him that she travels as well. Blake got more interest with her and said, does she travel on her own or with friends? Suddenly he got a jump as a box was quickly placed on the bar. He looked at the person. He wore a Hawaiian shirt with a bolo tie around the collar and had cream linen waistcoat and trousers. It was the doctor. He had been fixing a jukebox on the other side of the bar and had found a box of 45s. Blake said to him if he was the landlord of the pub. The doctor said he's a substitute landlord. The actual owners had to go to Mallorca for a family emergency, and having known them for some time offered his services while they were away till the end of August. Blake just nodded and took another sip of his pint. The doctor then looked through the box of 45s he found in the pub, which must belong to the owners. The Beatles' Ticket to Ride, Soft Cell's Tainted Love, Rick Astley's Never Gonna Give You Up. The doctor looked at the rest of the contents of the box and thought the selection was a bit plain by his standards. Louisa asked if he could fetch some his collection. He beamed at the suggestion. Blake suggested to him that he should go round and see what finds his fancy. The doctor agreed to the idea and told Louisa to hold the fort while he's gone out for a few hours. Blake said he'll stay at the pub and help out. Louisa raised an eyebrow at first but came to agreement to it, and then the doctor headed out of the pub looking for some new 45s. Blake was humming and erring at the bar waiting for a couple of punters to come. He had used pumps before on a few occasions, but not to serve customers but helping himself to booze when he was on stag doss. Then Louisa asked him to give her a hand with changing one of the barrels. The two managed to get rid of the empty one and insert the new one. Louisa inserted the pipe in until it sprayed her, soaking her top half. Blake, being generous, brought her a tea towel and she thanked him. He was still in that daydreaming state of how beautiful she was until he snapped out it when she whipped him in the chest with the tea towel, and both had a chuckle about it. The sunset was looming over Lake Windermere and a good number of punters were in. The southern tourists that Blake arrived with and a few locals. Business was going good. Then the doctor came in, carried 2 plastic bags with 45s, and was pleased that the pub was getting filled. He went to the jukebox and started to load the 45s into the machine. Turned it on and turned to the punters. He said the music will play and said to them to enjoy themselves. He put a coin in and pressed one of the buttons. All Day and All Night by the Kinks starts playing and a joyful atmosphere starts erupting. The doctor began tapping the edge of the bar with his hands and Louisa quickly dragged Blake from the bar to where the seats are. The doctor took control of the bar, sorting the punters out, and glanced at the two. She wanted to dance with him. Blake was a bit nervous. She then began pulling to and fro until he got his bearings. He got his groove her and embraced. The doctor shouted out for the punters to get their chance at the jukebox. Louisa took Blake outside to the beer garden. By the now it was nighttime and it was humid. Louisa gleefully smiled and laughed. She said to him he's pretty good when he starts revving up. He waved his hand, brushing him off cheekily, and then he turned to the covered up police box. He asked her about it and she said to him it's a bit of decoration. She said to him that she'd better be back in to assist the doctor. Before she could, Blake asked her if she's free tomorrow. She turned him and gave a smile. Sure. He can see her tomorrow and take her round the place. Blake was pleased and gave his farewell to her for the night. As he walked down the road he jumped in the air and shouted a yeah. The next morning Blake arrived at the hole in the wall. He knocked on the door and waited. The door opened and the doctor was there. He told Blake that he's not serving drinks till midday. Blake said to him that he's seeing Louisa. The doctor leaned out of the porch and called her from upstairs. She leaned out of the window while she was brushing her hair. The doctor asked her if she going out with Blake. She said yes and that she's checking out what Boness has to offer. The doctor paused for a minute and then agreed to the arrangement. Blake curiously chimed if the doctor was her uncle. The doctor said no. They're partners. Before Blake could utter a word the doctor said they're freelance business partners and Blake came out and, all right. Louisa said she's coming down in 5 minutes. She then came and Blake was astonished. She was wearing a white mini dress with small red flowers and a pair of light blue plimsolls. She gave him a hug and said goodbye to the doctor who was standing in the porch. She said she'll back in a few hours time and the two went off down the road. The doctor just stood there and breathed in some of that summer air. Blake and Louisa were on one of the motor vessels going across the lake. They were taking in the views in the summer heat and after a while the motor vessel reached its destination. While walking by the lake Louisa said to him that she needs to cool down due to the heat and suggests they take a dip in the lake. He said to her that he didn't pack any swimming trunks but she cheekily said to him he can go commando as she will as well because of the same reason and two headed to a quiet area. He watched her taking her mini dress off exposing her bra and underwear. He does the same and Louisa went in the lake first. He followed and had a swim round. She then started splashing water at him and playfully dunked his head underwater. The two hugged and kissed in the lake like they were slowing dancing. Hours later they returned to the pub only to witness the doctor in the middle of an argument with a retired married couple. Louisa intervened and demanded what was going on. The retired couple were the Reeds, school governors from Coal Hill School that the doctor had mentioned a few times, but Louisa thought this rivalry was petty, but it's revealed that he kidnapped two of the school's teachers when he was in Shoreditch in 1963. Science teacher Ian Chesterton and history teacher Barbara Wright. This is the reason why the doctor and the Reeds have this antagonist encounters from time to time. Louisa was caught off guard by this revelation and headed inside the pub without saying a word to him. Mr. Reed looked on at her and sneered to the doctor if he was keeping her captive. The doctor angrily retorted this nonsense. Mrs. Reed chimed in a savage comment, accusing the doctor that he is a molester and that he has temptations to murder her. The doctor reached breaking point with the two. He headed into the pub and returned armed with a cricket bat in hand. He threatened the Reeds by shouting out the word bastards repeatedly and violently swinging the bat around without hitting them. Blake intervened in the conflict and insisted them to stop. The Reeds stepped away and began to snootily walk off away from the doctor. The doctor, still holding the bat, walked onto the road and started shouting at them. They hoped that they crash their Alfa Romeo horrifically in a ditch. He returned to the pub and violently threw the bat to one side. He tells Blake leave. He'd heard enough of his past and wishes not get involved in what he does. Blake was unsure and leaves without saying goodbye. Louisa was upstairs in her room looking out of the window. She had witnessed the whole thing. The doctor opened her door and asked her if he can come in. She then scolds him about the whole teacher kidnapping business back in '63. Why? The doctor explained to her that Ian and Barbara were concerned about his granddaughter Susan. Louisa quickly pointed her finger up at him to pause his conversation. She didn't know he had a granddaughter nor mentioned her when she was traveling with him all this time, and she sighed. More skeletons were coming out of the cupboard with him. He continued that both he and Susan are not human, which the teachers caught wind of with Susan. To keep it all under wraps, he and Susan took off in the TARDIS with the teachers still on board. He then said they made back to their lives 2 years later but isn't sure what they are doing now these days. She then sat on the bed and says that he did the same to her when they met in Los Angeles in '79. His explanation was that he's still finding the kinks of his new TARDIS and that he'd recently regenerated into his new incarnation. She also mentioned that she only wanted to use the toilet but comes to the realization that traveling with him had opened her mind and made her life more interesting. He gave a slight smile to her and decided to leave her room. She then asked him if Blake would come back. He didn't turn back to her and said it's her decision to make. He walks off downstairs and she ponders in thought. July. Blake kept a distance from the hole in the wall. After the argument involving the doctor and the Reeds, he decided to check elsewhere around the town. He headed to a pub called the Old John Peel Inn. He ordered a pint of ale and sat down in a corner. Some of the locals gave him some eyes at him, a southerner in one of the local watering holes, and then he overheard a conversation between two men about the hole in the wall. The conversation involved the doctor and the electric atmosphere that person brought to the pub. Blake just continued sipping his pint and tried to ignore the nearby conversation. He then went off to the motor vessel bay and leaned against the metal barrier. While he was caught in the sight of the lake, he could sense someone walking and perched on the metal barrier. He slowly turned his head and realized that Louisa was next to him. She came to talk to him about last month's situation involving the doctor. Blake didn't mind but felt that the doctor's presence was a distraction between them, and Louisa said he doesn't mind all that relationship stuff, after all it's her decision to whom she goes out with. Blake felt a slight sigh of relief and suggested that she could meet him back at his hotel room later that night. Louisa didn't say a word but smiled at the idea and said to him okay. He was also smiled and said what room he's in. Louisa said she'll see him later and headed off back to the hole in the wall. Blake watched her go off and returned to his viewing of the lake. Later that night, Louisa told the doctor that she's seeing Blake at his hotel room. Before he went into a conversation, he brought out a condom out of his trouser pocket and handed it to her. She jokingly laughed at it and said she'll use it when she turns frisky. She headed off out the pub and went off into the night while the doctor tended to the punters. Blake was looking out of his hotel window when the door knocked. He quickly came to the door and opened it. Louisa quickly wrapped her arms around him and embraced each other. Pieces of clothing flew across the room and the two intertwined themselves in pleasure. They giggled and rousingly groaned. August. The doctor was fitting in a new barrel. After he finished it, he can hear someone walking into the pub and peered his head over the bar. He recognized that face. Someone he first met when he recently regenerated at the time. Monica Langdon, and she quickly recognized him as well. The two exchanged conversations, and from Monica's side of the story, she was here in the Lake District looking for someone. At first the doctor thought it was him, but she said no. She then mentioned the name Blake Charing. His ears pricked up and said he's been around here being a frequent punter. She asked him if he's staying at one of the hotels. The doctor just shrugged in response and said he doesn't know. Monica explained to him that she's trying to rekindle her relationship with him. After the events with Sue Cannon and the kidnapped children in Kendall, she ventured off down south. While she was there, she met Blake and hit it off. After a few months, she found out she was pregnant with his child, but she became emotional in the middle of the conversation. She suffered a miscarriage and it devastated both of them. After that, Blake was starting to drift away from her. She did try her best to keep their relationship going, but he bailed and left her without knowledge of where he went. She only knew from his mother Judy when she visited if he was living back with his parents, and hence why she turned up in the Lake District. The doctor knew that Louisa was with him but didn't know the revelation of Monica's miscarriage and that Blake was her partner. Monica's interest turned to the doctor. She asked what happened to him after he left. He just said to her it's a long story, but he's still the same man that she remembers, and afterwards Monica gave him a goodbye and left the pub. The doctor just sat there pondering if she'll found out that her ex-partner is sleeping with his companion and what the outcome will be like. Probably viciously and bitchy. Later that night, Monica entered the hotel Blake was staying and found his room number. She went upstairs and managed to find his room. She got a spare key for the room and entered in. She walked in silently and then witnessed Louisa nakedly riding Blake on the bed. He quickly saw her and pushed Louisa off him. Monica let out a furious rage, calling him a cheat and a screwer. Blake pathetically tried to make an explanation but was shut down by Monica. Louisa asked him who the hell is she. He said to Louisa that she's an old flame. Monica retorted that statement and shouted at him that she's his girl. Louisa wondered if Blake was a married man and that he lured her into an affair. Monica came up to the bed and stared at her. She mentioned that she knew the doctor. Louisa got up from the bed and asked her how. Monica sternly said she met him a year ago and went on why on earth would he travel with a piece of meat that shags any man in sight. Louisa then leapt from the bed and began throttle Monica on the floor. Blake just watched the carnage until it was stopped when the two girls saw a pair of brown leather Jinx boots in front of them. They looked up and the doctor loomed over them. He ordered Louisa to get dressed and return back to the pub. His attention turned to Blake, and judging by his expression he was quite pissed off. He walked slowly to Blake and said to him that he needs to decide either to return to Monica or leave and be under the radar. Monica questioned his interrogation, but before she could continue, Blake cowardly said he doesn't want to go back with her. Monica was stunned by this and tried to reason with Blake into not duping her again. Blake just grabbed some of his clothes and walked out the room. The doctor caught him by his shoulder. He was making a big mistake, but Blake just said he's made many mistakes in the past, but this one couldn't wrap up in a pretty bow and accept it. It was a dead end for him and walked off. Monica screamed for him in the corridor to come back, but he continued on. He shouted out without turning back, "I'm sorry," and headed out. Monica fell to her knees and cried her heart out. All the while the doctor and a half-dressed Louisa looked on at her. At the end of the month, the owners of Hole in the Wall returned from Mallorca and thanked the doctor for covering the pub while they were away. Louisa walked to the TARDIS while carrying a gym bag and went in. The doctor was going to enter in until Monica got his attention. She was standing in the middle of the road and he walked over to her. She said to him that she will be returning to the States to focus on her studies. He felt glad for her, and then she said to him if he's traveling the universe once again. He smirked at that response. He said he felt rejuvenated after staying in 1990 for 3 months and traveling worlds was starting to urge him back. Louisa meanwhile was watching the whole conversation via the scanner in the TARDIS. Her arms were folded and a sense of jealousy went through her mind. Monica gave him a hug and wished him well. He did the same and said she'll have a better future. He then headed to the TARDIS. The owners of the Hole in the Hall asked him if they could keep the jukebox. He kindly said yes and entered in. Louisa turned off the scanner and approached him. She wanted to know this Monica. He said to her that it was someone who assisted him on a disappearance case in 1989 and nothing else. Louisa just stared at him as he walked to the console. He then said to her about an engagement ring Monica gave him and reached into one of his pockets to get it to show her. The TARDIS started to dematerialize and vanished, leaving a gust of air. Monica had seen it and after a while started to walk off, starting a new chapter in her life.